The Key to the Indian by Reid Chapter 24, Visitors. For long seconds the echo of their own voices was all that came back to them, and the dark shadow of despair threatened them again. And then, amplified by the awful depths, they heard a well-known Texan voice. "If that's you, Patrick, I wouldn't advise you to get us out of here. If I was you, I'd leave us here to rot. Because if I ever get out, I'm going to bust your nose wide open. I'm going to kick your big ornery butt. I'm going to shove that there boat of yourn right down your miserable throat. And then, when I'm done with all that, I'm going to shoot you full of lead. Right there right through the belly button." "Oh, Boone, was all Patrick could say, grinning through tears of joy, as if the prospect of being busted, kicked, choked, and shot by his cowboy was all he could wish for, world without end. The next moment he had practically dived headfirst into the tank. Omri and his dad had to catch hold of his feet to stop him falling right in. A moment later, a hollow shout from within told them to drag him back out. He emerged, filthy to the elbows, but triumphant. In each hand he held a tiny sludge-blackened figure. Boone had somehow incredibly managed to keep jammed on his head his 10-gallon hat, which he now wrenched off, showing untainted red hair and a white crescent at the top of his filthy face. He took the hat by its brim in both hands and began to belabor Patrick's hand with it. "I'll kill you! That's what I'll do, you varmint! I'll beat you to death! If all the stinkingest places I've ever been in, and I've been in plenty, that there has got to be the worst. Look at me. I smell like I fell in the privy. Well, it's a matter of... Don't you utter a dad-blamed word, you miserable, no-account, low-life kid, you." His voice pitched up and went British in a mockery of Patrick's. Why don't you go boating, Boone? You love it. It's quite safe boating. Who in hell that was ever born in the state of Texas knows or cares anything about boats? Horses, yep. Boats, no sir. As for water, I don't even like drinking the stuff. But I tried again. All that's decent and natural for a Texan. I tried just to please you, but then what? You left us to make a meal for that dulgering rotten cat that near killed me once already. And as if that weren't enough, we had to jump down a well and get ourselves half drowned, and then... Well, he raved. Omri removed the other figure from Patrick's hand. It was Ruby, of course. He held her gently and looked at her. She wasn't wearing her wedding dress anymore. She was dressed for riding. Her beautiful blonde hair was all filthy and wet, and so were her clothes. But she didn't seem to notice. She was leaning out of Omri's hand, waving both arms at Boone and cheering him on. "You tell him, Billy. You give it to him, lover. If you don't, I will. Ooh, if I ever miss having kids, I'll only have to think that they might have been like that lousy snake-eyed Pat that I thought was the greatest kid on earth, and I'll thank my lucky stars I ain't got none." "Ruby, what?" "I think Patrick's really sorry." "Sorry ain't enough for what we've been through." "Would you like to clean up?" She seemed to notice Omri for the first time. She squinted at him through the dirt, and her angry face softened. "Well, now, that's a pretty darn silly question, I'd say. Come on, I'll take you." Omri turned toward the house. He thought he saw a face at the window nearest the door, but it vanished. Omri and Patrick crept upstairs to the bathroom, scene of the crime. Omri ran warm water into the coracle, which was just about the size of a jacuzzi to Boone and Ruby. He put a drop of bubble bath in to make it smell nice, and cut a clean washcloth into towels for them, while Patrick carved a couple of chips off a cake of soap with some nail scissors. They laid these on the wooden seat that spanned the circular coracle, and set a sort of screen around it made of two open books, kept handy by the loo. It was Patrick who thought of pouring a dribble of shampoo into the lid and lowering it into the new-made bathroom so Ruby Lou could wash her hair. At that, Omri, not to be outdone, found an old mascara brush of his mother's, and washed it carefully so Boone could use it to scrub his back. "You're going to have a good wash this time, Boone," he couldn't resist saying as he dropped it over the screen. He could already hear groans of pleasure as Ruby Lou lowered herself into the hot water. His dad had got an even better idea. He arrived a few minutes later with the lid of a chapstick full of scotch. He opened the screen a crack to be greeted with a modest shriek from Ruby and pushed it through. "Drop of the hard stuff for you, Boone," he said. "A drop!" screamed Ruby. "A bucket full more like! You shouldn't encourage him. I just got done making him give it up again." But the capful of whiskey was speedily dragged in, and they could hear appreciative gulps and lip smacks. And then they heard Ruby say, "Okay, Buster, no need to hog it all. Save a snifter for Ruby. I need it as bad as you do." "Let's leave them in peace," Omri's dad whispered. "What if Mum wants to come into the bathroom? We'll gee on. Gee on to the friends. Mum's busy anyway. I'll stand guard." The boys left the bathroom and heard the lock click into place. Omri said to Patrick, "He'd have done it, I bet. Everything he was threatening you with. If he'd just been big enough, you'd have been a goner." "Wouldn't have blamed him," Patrick mumbled. They went into Omri's room. The first thing Omri saw as he walked in was a tiny black horse standing in a makeshift corral on his desk. But the next thing he saw made him stop in his tracks. There beside the horse was a plastic bag. It was empty, and then he saw 4 little plastic figures standing in a row. "Patrick," he croaked out, "you didn't." "No, I nearly did. I damn nearly did." Omri stared at him speechlessly. "Listen, you think Boone was mad? I was 10 times madder. Now just listen. After you left, I spent the day hiking and picnicking, and then I camped out on the hill for the night as I said I would, and I was just like seething the whole time. Then I came back here and fed your mum that line we agreed on. I don't think she believed a word of it, but for some weird reason she didn't argue. Then I had to settle down here for a whole day yesterday with nothing to do but think of the fun you and your dad were having without me." "Fun?" Omri dropped his eyes. "Go on." "So last night I just couldn't stand it. I came here and started looking for where you'd hidden your little people. It wasn't too hard because you'd left fingerprints on the door, and I could see they were soot. So I looked up the chimney and I found them right away." Omri scowled. So much for his brilliant hiding place. "Well, I had the key, so I put them in the cupboard, and I was going to do it. All of them. But then I thought, no, one at a time was better. And I was going to bring Little Bear first because I knew he was looking after you. I wanted to take him away from you, kind of, but I thought I'd just bring Matron first. Of course, she was no fun at all. She was so mad at me for interrupting her work. She said a whole bunch of soldiers wounded at a place called Dunkirk had just been brought in, and she had no time for children's games, so I sent her back again. Quick. Then I brought Sergeant Fickets. He was okay. He sat and talked to me and told me about the army. It sounds really good. I might just join when I'm older. The Royal Marines, I mean, not the ordinary army. And I found myself telling him about you guys going off to the past without me, and how I wanted to, well, do something about it, only Fickets was against it. He said, what about comradeship and team spirit? And what if something was going on, even if Little Bear was just carrying you when I brought him and he suddenly fell down? He might squash you, and if things were really going badly for the Indians, there might be danger for you too. Was there? He asked eagerly. Did you have a terrific adventure? What happened to your dad's leg? I'm going to tell you everything. Just please finish your part. Well, like Fickets made me think about it a bit. Like imagine what might be happening and how me sticking Little Bear in the cupboard might cause something worse to happen. So I just got Fickets something to eat. I wanted to open a can of beer for him, but I knew your mum would notice. And we ate together and talked some more, and then he said he had to go back because of Suez. I said, where's Suez? And he told me I was an ignorant git. But he was really nice otherwise. And you've got him to thank. I didn't bring Little Bear after all. But you did bring Boone and Ruby Lou. Yeah, well, they're mine. I couldn't see anything against that. And I was still mad, and I wanted to have some fun. So I brought them, and we had a great time together. They told me what all they'd been doing. You're talking like him. And how they'd opened a saloon and eating house. Like Ruby runs it, and does the cooking, and keeps the customers in order, sort of. Boone did all the decorations with paintings all over the walls, and folks come from miles around to see it. They used to call it just Ruby's Saloon. Now everyone calls it the Picture Palace. Isn't that funny? Think of all the places that'll be called that in a few years because of movies. And Boone and Ruby's place is the first. Was. What's the difference? It's all just happening, isn't it? Omri nodded slowly. That was for sure. As soon as they'd had a wash, As soon as they've had a wash and got their clothes on, and got their dry clothes, we must send them back. They had to close. Oh, as soon as they've had a wash and got their clothes dry, we must send them back. They had to close the saloon for repairs after a bit of a fight in the bar, but they need to get back. Isn't it fantastic that it all turned out okay? He said with a carefree laugh. As if nothing at all bad had happened. Let's go back to the bathroom and see how they're getting on. And off he went. Omri heard him tapping on the door and his father letting him in. But Omri stood for a moment looking at Matron, Fickett's little bear and Bright Stars with Tall Bear in her arms, and thought, I could bring them, I could. But something inside him said, no, it's over. Omri felt the heavy sadness again and pressed the argument, the simple argument, but I could. I've got the cupboard. There's the key stuck in its lock. I could. But it was like a brick wall inside him. He knew he couldn't. Mustn't. Was this his magic part, the part his dad thought he'd inherited from Jessica Charlotte? Or was it just some instinctive wisdom, perhaps brought back with him from his time with the Indians, who knew things modern people had forgotten or never learnt? Anyhow, there was no gainsaying it. He took the 4 little figures and packed them away carefully in the cash box with Jessica Charlotte and the others. He closed the lid quietly, remembering how he'd once tied string around the Chinese boxes he kept his little people in, and buried them in box after box to make it hard to get at them. He didn't need to do it this time. Because who would he be protecting it from? Only himself, and he didn't need to. He decided to give the key back to his mother. She could hang it on her medallion chain like before. This time he would never ask her to give it back to him. And I can trust myself now, he thought. And that's the end of chapter 24.